Use your powers for evil.
Your evil is mine.
Stop everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. As always, I'm Charles Skaggs. With me in the TARDIS, of course, my partner in time and my partner in crime, Jesse Jackson.
Hello, Charles. Good to be in the TARDIS with you.
And, yep, here we are. We're ready with episode 93. We're getting up close to 100 of Next Stop Everywhere.
We are getting close, aren't we?
Yes, we are. So as we review today, we're going to review Castrovalva, the third part in the loosely termed Master Trilogy.
And every time I hear that name, I think of Casterly Rock and Cast the Year. It's a very Game of Thrones type name, even though it happened many years before George R.R. Martin started writing. But it reminds me of Game of Thrones every time I hear this name. Yeah,
so since you brought it up, Castrovalva is based on the name comes from a M.C. Escher painting. This is like a lithograph by the Dutch graphic artist M.C. Escher, who is primarily known for the paintings that kind of show recursion, which is a big theme in this story, where staircases kind of go into other staircases that go into other staircases that go back to the original staircase. So
very interesting. Yes, now that I know that, I see that very clearly in the episode.
So yeah, so it's definitely influenced by his works. But this one was like an early lithograph of his before he started doing those recursive paintings. And so yeah, it's a concept that's Escher just pretty much was known for. So it's almost like this episode is sort of a tribute to that artist. But so this is the first story, primarily known as Peter Davison's debut, and as you can see, I'm wearing my Peter Davison T-shirt in honor of this.
Yay, he is your doctor, you know.
Yeah, obviously Jesse can only see that, but those of you naturally out there in podcast land can't. But yes, I'm very excited about this because obviously Peter Davison, yes, is my doctor, and this is his debut story. Not the first one he recorded, which I believe was For to Doomsday, but this one, I think it was. You mentioned this last time that this was recorded after a few episodes, so that Peter Davison could kind of get a better handle on his doctor before to start off the series.
Yeah, and I've watched a lot of the making of stuff, on the DVDs that Ken had lent me. This is like back in 2007 when this was released. So, and there's a lot of discussion. They interview Peter talking about trying to find his way, and that you couldn't, it's a blank slate each time, and specifically with the showrunners wanting a totally different kind of doctor. And so I think that was fair as an actor to give him a couple of episodes to kind of find his footing. I do think the script did not serve him well in this episode. I was not as happy with this episode as the other two I've seen on this trilogy.
Okay.
But I think that is more of circumstances, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get further into it.
Okay, that's fair enough. But obviously Davison had the unevenable. I can't pronounce the word.
He had the unfortunate timing
there
of
you go.
following
Yes, there you go.
perhaps the most beloved actor who's played the role in modern era, and that does include Matt Smith, David Tennant. He is, Tom Baker is by many people the gold standard of the Doctor.
Unenviable. That's the word.
There you go. Very nice. I got
there eventually.
Yes, you did. Very good, Charles.
As you can tell, we're recording on a Sunday morning, and apparently Charles' brain not working properly. So eventually I got there.
Which is not good because before we hit record, this is the Sunday after chemo.
Yeah.
For me, so I am running low too. So this may be a wheels podcast. Off episode. This may be awesome.
Yeah, this could be. So if any indication of my previous podcast with Karen on the Fandom Zone podcast have proven, this could be a fun one. So this is written by Christopher H. Bidmead, who wrote the previous story Legopolis, which obviously takes place immediately after. Directed by Fiona Cumming, one of the few female directors of the original series of Doctor Who. And this was the first serial of season 19 in 1982, which was a big year in sci-fi goodness. So, so I want to mention the guest cast. There's a couple of notable people in this story before we get started. Obviously, we get the return of Anthony Ainley as the Third Master, and also plays the Portreeve in this story.
So, what I find funny, I have to, is I stand by my unhappiness with the modern Master, being in disguise all this time with Bill. But I now embrace the fact that you guys are right. He loves his disguises.
Yes, he does. It's his thing.
It is his thing.
Now you can appreciate that more. Now that
I can.
If you go back and watch World Enough in Time, you should be able to appreciate it better. But now you know why we were, I was so excited. Like, he's in disguise again.
Yes, I do. I see that, and it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I don't think it needed to be in that. We won't rehash that, but it is. You can see that's just, like the Riddler leaving clues or the Penguin loving umbrellas. He just loves him a disguise.
This is true. Another actor featured in this story is Michael Sheard, who plays Murgrave, and he's been in a number of Doctor Who stories. He was Rose. The character Rose in The Ark, which was a William Hartnell story. Dr. Roland Summers in The Mind of Evil, which was a John Pertwee story. You may remember him, Jesse, as Lawrence Scarman in Pyramid of Mars. He's the brother of the guy Scarman that gets possessed by the forces of Anubis.
Okay, very nice.
The brother that ends up helping the Doctor and Sarah Jane. And then he played Lowe in The Invisible Enemy, which was another Tom Baker story. And then later, after this story, he plays the headmaster in Remembrance of the Daleks. So you may remember him there as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So if there is a cast of Doctor Who players,
yes.
If we cross genre for a minute, John Ford had a list of John Ford characters. There were character actors that were in most of John Ford's westerns. So this guy would be in a Doctor Who player which is kind of cool.
Yeah, he's in 6 stories and ranging from the first Doctor to the 7th Doctor. So that's pretty impressive.
That is darn impressive.
And but primarily, you may know him if he looks a little familiar to you. You may remember him as Admiral Ozzel in The Empire Strikes Back.
Ah, very nice.
And he also played Adolf Hitler in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Very cool.
So a little shout out there. So yes, he's the guy, obviously the Hitler that signs Indy's father's diary, thinking it's his book, Mein Kampf. And so that's where you know him from.
Okay.
But just want to give a shout out to that guy, obviously, because he's been in a lot of Doctor Who, and he's been in a couple notable movies.
Absolutely.
And then the other actor I want to mention in the story is this girl, this little girl named Suska John. Now she plays the child that goes as Peter Davison. Well, the Fifth Doctor is trying to count from 1 to 3. And he's going 1, 2, and he can't quite remember what comes after it. And this girl comes up and says 3, sir. And the Davison says, well, we ought to give you a badge for mathematical excellence, which helps him remember Adric. Well, that girl.
Yes, it does. That does. I thought that was a really nice little
moment.
Yeah.
So this girl, interestingly enough, here's a little bit of trivia, Doctor Who trivia. She is the niece of Caroline John, who played Liz Shaw, the Third Doctor's first companion in Spearhead from Space through Inferno.
Nice.
So if you remember Liz, this is her niece.
Very cool.
A little bit of trivia there. So, all right. Now that we got that out of the way, let's dive right into our first topic this week. The problem with regeneration. And this is Peter Davison's debut as the Fifth Doctor. So, Jesse, you finally get to see how the Fifth Doctor regenerated from the Fourth Doctor, and now you kind of see him going through a problematic regeneration with some post-regenerative amnesia, so that concept's kind of introduced. And I want to get your thoughts on Peter Davison's debut.
So, I had a couple questions for you.
Yes.
Is this the first time we've had this difficult of a transition? Or was this already established that at times regenerations can go rocky?
Well, I think with the Second Doctor regenerating into Third Doctor, when the Third Doctor arrived on Earth, he had a little bit of post-regenerative amnesia, but it went away pretty quickly.
Okay.
And if you remember from Spearhead from Space. Now, right. Robot, Tom Baker's story, he essentially is having a, he has a little bit of, it takes him a little while to get his feet wet back, to where he wants to be. But again, it's not as long as Davison's regeneration, because, the Fifth Doctor, he's pretty much struggling throughout most of this episode. It's only until like the fourth episode where he kind of gets together enough.
Yeah, and I think they stretched it a little too long. And it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback,
right.
A backseat driver, whatever you're going to call it. I thought it went a little too long. I think in theory, him calling Adric Jamie and talking about other.
He basically there are moments where he's reliving his previous lives, and he kind of sees his current companions as previous companions,
which I thought was a nice moment. I also thought that whoever came up with the idea of unraveling the scarf was genius, because
it's a great metaphor.
It is a great metaphor. It is because, this Wendy, who does Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV podcast, who's been on the show with us, she talked about she could remember that when you went from fourth to fifth, she remembers there was a lot of discussion in fandom. Would the new Doctor have a scarf? And she, because that was just, and she could remember that. And so to have that metaphor of him unweaving that was really smart. Because
it does serve the purpose of creating a trail back to the console room
Yes.
as the Doctor goes further into the TARDIS so he could find his way back. But it's a great metaphor for the fact that what you knew of the Fourth Doctor is unraveling, and there's going to be something else. Like that era is now like gone.
Yeah, and then when you have the added, we would not have known this at time watching it live, or if you had not watched some making of. But the behind the scenes people were kind of tired of Tom Baker, and so there's just multi layers of there that's very fascinating. I did like Davison's performance immediately. Like I said, I think.
Have you warmed to him more as the Doctor?
Yes, I have. I like him. I like his intelligence, and I like his quote unquote youthful energy.
Right.
I just don't know if and once again, I think this is a problem with many of the classic episodes. I'm watching it with modern eyes,
right?
So I'm expecting a different pacing. I'm in some of the classic episodes, I've shared with you that this thing works just as well as any modern episode. This one I felt was a little trouble pacing, and because they're trying to go through the 4, the 2 hours, the 4 segments.
Yeah, hour and a half, yeah.
Yeah. But I liked him, and I liked by the end. I think he was charming when he said, when I'm feeling like myself, and he kind of talked, well, I'm my new self. I'm feeling like my new self. I'm quoting him incorrectly,
right.
but
yeah.
By the end of the episode, I really felt like he was, he was the Doctor. I felt like, hey, let's get in the TARDIS and go have adventures. And I liked his costume. I think there's discussion about, how much Davison had to do with the cricket, but
right.
I think the vest and the light colors really work well for him.
Because he does have that fair-haired complexion.
Yes.
And so, he has a very fair, in appearance, costume.
Yes.
That cream-colored coat, with the kind of like cream and white trousers, the white sweater, the white cricket sweater, and it's very positive, and especially contrasting against Tom Baker's final look as the Fourth Doctor, which was in that burgundy, and it was a little darker, a little more serious. So it's like this is bright optimism.
Yes.
Returning to the series.
And I also, I at times, I realized that Wales or England, whenever they film this, is a different temperature than, Texas.
Right.
But I always, whenever I see people cosplaying the Fourth Doctor in that big coat and the scarf in a July,
like, aren't you hot
convention,
under that thing?
Like, so it just felt, watching that made me feel less like, oh, good, Peter's not going to be passing out because of heat exhaustion. So,
well, it's really interesting because he's got a shirt, then he's got a sweater, and then he has the coat on top of that.
Right.
So he is kind of bundled up.
He is, but it doesn't look as bundled. It looks like, and this is fashion talk on Next Stop Everywhere.
Exactly.
But it almost looks like linen, like a very breathable material versus the wool coat that Baker had, and with the heavy scarf. This looked more like it would be a little easier in breathing. So
and then he's got his very casual Panama hat,
which I love.
I love that hat too.
He looks great in that.
And he's a much more casual Doctor.
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
He's not as intense.
Right.
And with Davison smiling all the time. So it's just it projects this warmth that hasn't been in the series for a while.
I agree.
At this point. So but his performance, you enjoyed that? apparently, and
I did. I think I think he showed his intelligence. I think he shared. I think he showed how,
you showed his
like I said, the
range,
intelligence and his range. Yes, and this is a likable doctor.
right?
And I think it's interesting that the acting choices he made, that I've got to make sure the doctor is accessible, but I'm unique, and so I think he did really well.
And he does have a sense of humor, because
I agree.
there's like moments where he kind of he'll quip a line here and there. So yeah, he's not a very serious doctor.
No, he isn't.
But he's not a clown either.
No, not at all.
So, all right, but yeah, I really enjoyed his performance because hey, he's my doctor, so I'm a little biased. I will be the first to admit that.
Yeah.
So it may not mean as much coming from me, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I know you are. You are.
I try to be fair.
Yeah, I think you are very fair, and obviously we come with our biases, but I think. And I also think so much of the show is what kind of stories they get.
Right.
And when we get to our next topic, we will talk my big problem with this episode.
Okay, fair enough. So before we could do that, though,
yes.
I do want to mention because since this is like the third story, my third full story, as a Doctor Who fan. Back in the day, when in my teenage years, watching it on a Saturday afternoon on PBS, which I think is still the ideal time to watch some classic Doctor Who is on a Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely.
And,
I watched this yesterday on Saturday afternoon.
There you go.
So, yes.
But for me, obviously, this was a big deal because I had just seen the Doctor in two stories, The Keeper of Traken and Logopolis, and now it's a completely new Doctor, so it's a completely new approach. And Davison obviously won me over very quickly. I was really intrigued by the fact that, okay, he's going through a lot here. It's just not just, okay, it's some new guy taking over the role. It's, there's a struggle here. And, he's trying to find himself.
Yes.
Which I found interesting. And, and obviously it's taken a toll mentally and physically, where he's having to, be in the zero room, be in the zero cabinet later on to kind of keep himself together enough until his dendrites heal and he can actually function. So, it's kind of like that moment. I'm reminded of the modern story, The Christmas Invasion.
Spoilers on Reverse the Polarity.
I kind of figured. Yes. I kind of figured that's where you might go because,
yes.
Again, you had the Tennant's Doctor. He's out for most of the episode in that story. Yes. His body he's having a very problematic regeneration, just like the Fifth Doctor here. So the parallels, regardless of the outside, familial connections that between Davison and Tennant, that their doctors are very parallel in the sense that he's struggling, and without spoiling your reverse the polarity, I'm guessing that he's going through a struggle. And that's what I really enjoy that because I also enjoy the Christmas Invasion for that reason.
Yeah, I agree, and I think when we get to that, we'll discuss a little bit, modern storytelling versus classic storytelling. But by the way, also I wanted to bring up the little mini episode where the 10th Doctor met the 5th Doctor.
Time Crash.
Yeah, Time Crash. And, the 10th Doctor, or Tennant, is talking about how he wore trainers because of him.
Right.
And he put the glasses on because
the brainy
of him.
Specs, yeah.
Yeah, and,
So you got to see the debut in this story of the brainy Specs.
And so I cannot tell you how big of a smile I got when I saw him a couple of times, Davison pull out his glasses and put them on,
Right.
as if, well, I need reading glasses. And
see, I thought that was a great touch for his doctor back then, because obviously then he looked so young.
Yes.
And it kind of aged his doctor a little bit.
Yes.
Because of those bifocals.
Yes, and I also, as we get to maybe a little bit too specific, but Baker had dark hair, and it was this curly, kind of
mop.
Afro mop.
Yeah.
And Davison has very blonde,
straight hair,
and it's very straight, and it is
nothing wrong with straight hair.
No, it is longer than most people would wear now, but it isn't a total. Like every once in a while you'll see, wow, okay, that's a very 70s or 80s haircut.
Yeah, it's a very early 80s hairstyle.
Yeah, but it looks very classic, and so
and it looks good on him.
It does look
that kind
really
of shaggy, longer hair.
Yes, it looks really good on him.
Yeah,
okay,
it's almost like he just came off the beach.
It truly did, and I talked about this in our previous episodes. I've never understood, the talk about how youthful he looks, but he is very youthful in these episodes. He does have a energy and a freshness, similar to both Tennant and Matt Smith's, taking over that youthful, bubbly, almost childlike enthusiasm. So I truly can understand why you love this doctor so much. How long did people adjust fairly quickly to him being it instead of Baker?
Well, obviously back in the 80s when I started watching these episodes in America, I wasn't really aware, because we didn't have, obviously, the internet back then, because we played with rocks and sticks.
Yes, indeed, we did.
And so we didn't have the internet back then, so we couldn't really gauge the UK reaction. All we could get was what we saw in magazines about Doctor Who, or maybe like you'd see something in a reprinted newspaper article from the UK in some book or something. But so we didn't really have an idea what the UK fans thought. I have to think, obviously you had Tom Baker fans. We've talked about the cycle, the regeneration cycle of Doctor Who fans, where you start off hating the new Doctor, and then you're like, oh, I guess he's kind of okay. And then by the end of the era, you're like, oh, I don't want him to leave. And then the cycle starts all over again with the next Doctor after that.
Okay.
So I have to think that there was probably some resistance, because Tom Baker had been the Doctor for 7 years, but Davison, because he's so personable, and likable, I have to think he won over fans. I mean, he was the Doctor for 3 seasons, so
which was interesting. He talked about in this making of that. Yes. He did not enjoy the second season very much. And so he had signed up for 3 seasons. He was like, okay, fine. And then he enjoyed that final season. And he said if the third had been the second season, he may have signed on for another year or two, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, Davison's second season is more of it was an attempt to okay, we're going to bring back the classic foes from back in the day. So you get to see the Black Guardian, you see the Master, and you get the return of the Mara from season 1, his first season, and so you get the return of Omega. So it was that, but I think Davison, just because the emphasis was on the returning foes more than his Doctor or the companions.
Yes.
So maybe that's why he had a problem with that season.
Okay.
But his third season, he really seems to come into his own. And the stories kind of give him more to do. And in a much more dramatic fashion.
Good. Okay.
And especially his final story, The Caves of Androzani, which I believe is his final performance, his best performance, really.
Very nice.
As the Doctor. Okay, so let's move on to our second topic. If we had an index file, ...
Yes.
And this is Tegan and Nyssa versus Event 1 and the Zero Cabinet, because Tegan and Nyssa are Tegan just appeared debuted in Legopolis, the previous story, and here she's kind of Nyssa, the story before that, the Keeper of Traken. But here they're kind of forced to work together, and this is kind of where they develop their friendship. So as they have to struggle with almost dying in the Master's trap, and also trying to help the Doctor stay alive. So I want to get your takes on that.
So I guess there's a fair discussion about the TARDIS being too crowded.
Yes.
With 3 companions, though someone brought up a good point that the original first season had 3 companions.
Yeah, because you had Ian, Barbara, and Susan. So
right.
yeah. So that's basically, it was an attempt to go back to that original group.
So I am sure that the actresses playing Tegan and Nyssa are very fine people.
Right.
But I did not like their characters at all.
Really?
Yeah. Partly because they just... I just... Like Tegan last episode was, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, oh, now I'm an expert on things. Like, where did that
she's kind of forced to step up to the plate. There's a great line. I want to just, before we go into more of your rant.
Yes.
There's a great moment in the Zero Room where the Doctor kind of outlines their roles in this story. Tegan is Tegan is the coordinator. So she's basically there to kind of like try to organize things and get things moving. Nyssa has the technical skills, and Adric is the navigator.
Right.
So they each serve a purpose.
Yeah, I guess. I just didn't like their interactions together. I felt there was
so even like when they're trying to get the Doctor's Zero Cabinet through the forest. And
then them climbing the rocks, and there seems to be a lot of bickering between each other.
Well, I don't think they were bickering. I think they were just like trying to okay, what do we do? Because they're kind of like, well, we don't exactly have directions here. The thing is, though, they're left to themselves. The Doctor isn't there to guide them.
Yeah.
Kind of like Rose and Mickey in the Christmas Invasion.
And maybe I like Rose and Mickey better. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Maybe.
I also think, I don't know. I think this would have been better if we had more time with both of them before the regeneration. I just didn't care for these companions at all. And, I've watched that episode after Adric dies, spoilers.
Yeah.
And I didn't like them in that episode either. I just do not find them as enjoyable companions versus, other companions I've really liked in this classic era.
Okay.
I don't know if it's also, this is very shallow on my part, but wouldn't you get better shoes and get out of your stewardess uniform if you're going to go out in the woods?
Well,
there is a whole TARDIS wardrobe.
Right.
Wouldn't we have gotten a little more practical clothes? And
I agree. Well, Nyssa, if you notice, Nyssa gets out of her fairy skirt, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And she gets into pants, which are far more practical.
Yes.
But Tegan's still in her stewardess uniform. Maybe, I think it's primarily because Tegan doesn't want to give up that life yet.
And I think that's a fair.
And I think that's kind of her personality is that she's just like, okay, I'm going to stay in this stewardess uniform, this flight attendant uniform.
Yeah.
And this is my anchor to the real world.
Okay, and I think that's a very valid.
But I agree. It's not very practical. Again, this was the 80s.
Yes.
So this is before Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we didn't quite get as practical.
Yes.
Back then.
So what are your thoughts about them as companions?
Well, the way I see this is, and this is just my take on this. This is Nyssa and Tegan's trial by fire. Here they are. They've recently boarded the TARDIS, but they haven't really had that much to do until now. And Adric's not there to guide them. The Doctor isn't there to guide them. It's up to these two. And interestingly, it's two women that are having to help save the day here by getting the Doctor to Castrovalva so that he can heal. And so the way I see it is that it's their struggle because you have initially you have the Master's trap, and Nyssa has to assemble the Zero Cabinet to get the Doctor semi-functional to help them, and then obviously when they land on Castrovalva, even though later Tegan finds out, well, hey, the Master planned that all along. It wasn't me piloting it. It's up to her to kind of like, okay, I'm going to climb a tree, and they'll like, okay, I'm going to look for it. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're going to head in this direction. And they go off into the forest. Nyssa, they have a moment where they're adjusting the Zero Cabinet, and the Doctor's wheelchair that they're using to kind of push the Zero Cabinet along because they don't have as much body strength. That falls into this nearby river, and there's kind of a comedic moment where Nyssa slips and falls in, and she's all, ew, and she has kind of a girly moment there, which I kind of liked.
Yes.
And because it's real. And but then the wheelchair doesn't work because it's electrical afterwards, because it kind of shorts out from being in the river, and they can't repair it, so they're kind of forced to kind of struggle to get there. And there's nobody there to lead them, so they're having to kind of figure this along on their own, and they're also kind of bonding in the process, and it sets up their friendship for later stories.
Okay, fair enough.
I've had the advantage of seeing the later stories, so I know they have a very close friendship, and I think it really starts here.
Very cool. Okay, good deal.
That's my take on it.
Good.
So, anything else about this?
No, I do think it is, if I look at it from your perspective, I'm a little more happy with them.
Okay.
But I just my gut, first reaction was I just didn't care for these two as companions.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's move on to our third topic.
Okay.
That wretched square again, which I just love Tegan's delivery.
Yes.
The recursive world of Castrovalva. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on Castrovalva, which I thought was a very cool set. This big kind of like self-contained community, and which obviously took place in a studio somewhere. But then they also had some great location filming, and so it looks very nice, and that kind of almost like a tropical forest kind of setting. And so I kind of want to get your thoughts on the characters that were introduced, like Shardavan, and the others, Murgrave, and that world, that fictional world that was created.
So I really liked this setting.
Uh-huh.
I kind of liked the combination of, libraries and all the books, and then everyone being, the people going hunting and the really
gaudy costumes,
wretched, kind of horrible looking costumes. But then, and kind of the joke about, I hope we've got something better to eat than this when they look at the Doctor. And then I really enjoyed the scene where they take the chalk and they do the square.
Yeah.
And they keep talking about how this is
like the Doctor's trying to make them understand the recursion, but they can't because they're part of that recursion.
Yeah. And they go, where's your pharmacy? Well, it's here, 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 here.
Yeah.
How many pharmacies do you have? I have one. Well, but you can get to it different ways, and the different staircases and everything. So I thought
they try to rationalize it.
Yes. And it was obviously I recognized the Anthony Ainley as the not only the master but as the
Portrayed.
learned guy. I'm like, okay, with
so you weren't fooled this time. You spotted it.
No,
right
I
away.
wasn't fooled at this time. I know right away, like, okay, this guy's going to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
So
now did you think that because Shardovan, that tall guy with the mustache, did you think that because he was initially portrayed as this almost like a sort of could be sinister up to no good figure, and then ultimately he kind of turns heroic in the final episode as he destroys the Master's web. My web! I just kind of love Anthony Ainley's delivery with that.
I love everything about that.
It was so over the top, and I just
it was over the top. And then Adric, the poor actor Matthew, I think is his name.
Matthew Waterhouse.
Yeah, sitting there just I just got to stand up here with my hands up.
Yeah.
I'm stuck in this web.
Right.
I'm always suspicious when you go to a new world.
Right.
Who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, and kind of the tricks. So yes, I was suspicious as all of them. Kept waiting for the other shoe to fall.
Right.
And then as the story continues, you go, most of these are good people.
Right.
And this whole, I bought the premise that, okay, because this was a rocky regeneration, we need silence. We need no technology. We need no radio waves beaming into them. The Doctor needs to just kind of finish, quote unquote, cooking.
Yeah.
Without any outside influences before he gets going. So, I bought the premise of this. I was enjoying that. I did like that. Davison is looking for the Doctor. And when he goes to take that nap, good night, Doctor, someone says, he goes, oh, yes. And then he kind of, how often when we go to sleep, you have this thought.
Yes.
And then it escapes you before you went to sleep. And then when you wake up, you don't remember that thought. So I thought everything about the world was well done.
Yeah. I mean, and they try to give it like its own culture, like, hey, we're essentially like, we like books, and we enjoy, like one character says that they read far too often, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's like, they just seems like, it seems like a very pleasant community. And
I'm sure they have celery.
That's true. Yes. So that was where, so you get the first, moment of the Fifth Doctor embracing, like, okay, he takes a bite of celery. Interesting side note, Peter Davison, not that fond of celery in real life.
Yes, I heard that. Now, what is, I think, very funny is I have been lucky enough to be at a couple of conventions where he's been at, and he will often have in his street clothes someone has knitted a stalk of celery.
Right.
And he will have that on his shirt lapel, which I think is pretty funny since he doesn't like celery, but he does acknowledge that, Baker got a scarf.
Yeah, that's my thing. It's what people know me from.
Yeah, exactly.
The decorative vegetable.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought it was a fun moment. It was great to see again.
Yes, absolutely.
And obviously at the end of the episode is when he sticks that celery on his lapel for good.
Right.
And kind of defines his Doctor era, ridiculous or not, it's just something weird he's got in his lapel. It's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
And it's just shows how eccentric he is, I think.
Exactly.
Okay. Final topic this week. The Master leaves nothing to chance. And that's Anthony Ainley as the Portreeve and the Third Master.
Yeah, I don't think they served him very well. He was off screen too much.
Right.
Or off screen or on screen being in disguise.
Well, they had to show. They had to. They wanted to showcase Davison.
Right.
And the companions.
Right. So once again, too much to trying to fit too much into it. Yet, I don't think it kind of worked. So I don't really. I get that the Master was in all 3 episodes.
Right.
But I don't know if I would have called it a trilogy because...
Well, like I said, it's a loose trilogy.
Yes, it is.
Because the Master is in all 3 episodes, and the stories kind of flow into one another.
Right. Yeah.
Even though they're kind of self-contained, they connect.
Yes. But he had a plan and it didn't work. Yeah. And then he
actually had 2 plans because of the Event 1 trap, which I thought was very clever, where he's basically like, you kidnapped Adric, and he's got control of the TARDIS and is sending it back to the hydrogen inrush,
right?
Which of course leads to the Big Bang. And hey, that was another great episode, the Big Bang. That's his trap. But Nyssa and Tegan, working with the Doctor, helping him get functional enough, they avoid that trap by jettisoning 1/4 of the TARDIS. So here we have that introduction of the concept that the TARDIS can jettison rooms, which plays into the Doctor's wife later on.
Yes, it is.
If you recall.
Yes.
And then the second trap is obviously Castrovalva itself, this recursive world, and ideally the Master planned to strand the Doctor there, but when he tries to escape, the recursion is, because of the web being disrupted by the death of Shardavan, ends up crashing to the point where even the Master's TARDIS can't escape. Yeah. So what did you think of the Master's TARDIS being hidden as a fireplace, I should ask?
Every time his TARDIS is a different
Did you expect
item.
Expect it to be the fireplace?
I did not expect it to be the fireplace, but I smiled and I love that. I love the idea that just his chameleon circuit works and how
anything could be the Master's TARDIS at any given moment.
Yes, and I just love that. I just think that's so much fun.
Yeah, and it helps him get away.
Yes, it does.
From a writing standpoint, you're able to write your character out easily.
Absolutely.
That way, like, oh, guess what? It was right here all along.
But he's certainly a strong villain. I love the back and forth.
What did you think of Anthony Ainley's performance as the Portreeve? Obviously an older character, seemingly benevolent, but of course you recognized him, so you knew he was up to no good.
But I thought he played that.
He gives him a different voice. It's not like
the wise
old man.
Was well done. So I knew. I assumed it was the Master, though I wouldn't have been shocked if they just wanted for some other reason to have this actor play the same role.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was great. I like the Master. I think I would have liked him more hands-on because I like the Master when he's more hands-on, which I think goes back to that first episode where the Doctor is wandering the corridors. I think went on a little bit too long, and I think you could have edited this together and been a little more of a dynamic story, and it would have worked better for me.
Okay. I like the fact that we got to see more of the TARDIS interior.
Yeah, that's always good. I always love seeing that. But
we get the introduction of the Zero Room concept, which I'd like to see them bring back. I don't know why they haven't brought that back.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see that back again at some point. Maybe with Jodie Whittaker. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows, eh? Who knows?
Yes, exactly.
Now, one thing I want to mention while we're on the topic of the Master before we move on. The Portreeve is credited as this actor named Neil Toynay. And obviously this is another in-joke with the credits, because Neil Toynay is an anagram of Tony Ainley.
Very nice.
So
very well
sly,
done.
Very sly. And I also want to mention that this is also the first story that has a pre-credit sequence, because we kind of recap the events of Legopolis. But again, this is the first before the modern era, which kind of opens up with things happening before the credits.
Right.
This is the first time we actually see that in Classic Who. I think it only happens one other time, and that's in the Remembrance of the Daleks, I believe.
And isn't this Peter Davison asked them to change the credit where he is the Doctor,
Yes.
not Doctor Who?
Yeah, this is the first story in Classic Who that refers to his character as the Doctor rather than Doctor Who. You're absolutely right.
Which is, I think, much better.
Yeah. And we also talked about when the Fifth Doctor kind of channels his older selves. I want to kind of give a rundown of that.
Please share.
Yeah. So first he adopts his first incarnation, or actually he grabs his lapels like the first Doctor did. And then he also later addresses Adric as the Brigadier and Jamie. So he kind of channels the second Doctor a little bit. He addresses Tegan as Vicky and Joe. So that's Vicky from the first Doctor era and Joe Grant from the third Doctor era. And he mentions the Ice Warriors and K9. So because he talks about how K9 can help Nyssa and Tegan. And they're like, both of them are probably like, okay, who's K9?
Yes, exactly.
Because neither of them have met K9. So fat lot of good that does. And he mentioned, of course, to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. That gets a little shout out.
Yes, indeed.
Let's see. And he does the When I Say Run, Run, which is from the second Doctor era as well. So I just kind of wanted to mention, for those of you who are looking for Easter eggs.
Very nice.
Check that out. So
cool.
All right. Anything else about the story before we move on to favorite quotes?
No. Like I said, this is my least favorite of the three.
Okay.
But not a bad. I'm glad I watched all three, and
it's mostly an introduction to the Fifth Doctor.
Yes, it is, and I think
it sets him up with his companions, and it kind of sets off that new era.
And I think if I'm judging it when you get to my ratings as an episode, not just an introduction, but as an episode as whole.
Right.
I think. Well, I'll save that. I'll panish it when we're doing our ratings.
Okay.
So I did not write down any quotes, so please share some that you have.
Okay. I have some quotes.
Thank you.
Let's see. First off, this one line from Tegan, which I liked, where she talks about if. She says, if. My dad used to say that if was the most powerful word in the English language. Which I would kind of agree it is.
Yes.
Because it if I could do this, that means that's like, it drives you forward. That like, hey, I could dream. Like, what if?
Yes.
So it's
and I totally agree. I think that is a great quote. I think that it's also a great philosophy, right? But what if we could?
Yeah, exactly.
And so a good mindset.
Yep. And obviously, IF is used as index file in the story. So you have that line from Tegan that's like, well, if we had an index file, we could look it up under index file, or look it up in the index file under an index file.
Yes.
So the other quote I had, let's see, it's an exchange between Nyssa and Tegan, where she says, they're talking about the Zero Room, and Nyssa says, I suppose it's some sort of neutral environment, an isolated space cut off from the rest of the universe. And Tegan replies, he should have told me that's what he wanted. I could have shown him Brisbane.
Yes.
Referring to the city of Brisbane in Australia.
Ah, very nice.
So obviously where Tegan's from.
A little Australian humor there.
Exactly. This line from the Fifth Doctor, shortly after he regenerates and sees his reflection in the mirror for the first time, which I really love this line. That's the trouble with regeneration. You never quite know what you're going to get.
Yes, indeed.
And, that basically applies to any doctor that, would see his reflection for the first time. So I kind of see this as like a definitive post-regeneration line from the doctor.
Absolutely. Or Still not ginger.
Yeah, exactly. So this would be the kind of line that would be perfect for Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor.
Oh, yes. We can
if she
keep our fingers crossed.
Sees her reflection for the first time and saying, like, well, that's the trouble with your generation. You never quite know what you're going to get. And so it emphasizes that unpredictability. There's another exchange where, well, actually, not really exchange. It's the Doctor when he's in the square and he's asking for directions. And he goes, what's the quickest way out of here? And then all of a sudden, everybody in Castrovalva, the washwomen, kind of point all in different directions.
Yes.
And Davison quips, which I love, well, yes, well, that's democracy for you.
Nice line.
Yeah, I thought so. So I like that. So those are my favorite quotes this time.
Good. Very good.
All right. So what's your rating for this?
So
I'm guessing it's not as high.
No. If I was going to do Davison, I would give it 9 out of 10 stalks of celery. But as a story, I give it 7 out of 10 wheelchairs.
Okay. Very nice. Now, obviously, this was a story that captured my imagination
Absolutely.
as a wee lad. And so I'm going to rate this one a little bit higher, obviously. I give it 9 out of 10 zero cabinets because I fell in love with Peter Davison's Doctor, thought it was great. And I love the freshness and that sudden change. And it just obviously stuck. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm probably grading this a little harsh, on a scale. But
that's okay.
I do think, though, I'm certainly glad. But I do see why a young Charles with his Pepsi and chocolate chip cookies would go, this is amazing.
Actually, it would be Dr. Pepper, but hey.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. It was obviously, like the third, that third thing that pretty much cemented me as a Doctor Who fan, especially as a Fifth Doctor fan.
Yeah.
So
I can totally see that.
Yeah. And he was younger, Davison's Doctor was, than the Fourth Doctor. So, being young as myself, so it made it a little bit more, his Doctor more easier to identify with, I think. For me.
Very nice.
So, all right. So I'm guessing I know what your reverse the polarity segment is.
Yeah, this is, I didn't try to be clever. I just decided that this was going back December 25th, 2005. It was the Christmas invasion.
Almost 12 years ago now.
Yes.
Can you believe it?
No. It was the first appearance of the 10th Doctor, the start of the modern tradition of Christmas specials.
Right.
Which is truly one of the best parts of the holiday season.
Yes.
I just love the idea that, after all the hustle and bustle of Christmas, on Christmas Day, you actually get to sit down with your family and watch, a special Doctor Who episode. So,
hopefully that'll continue with Chris Chibnall, the new showrunner.
I hope so. I will be very sad if it doesn't.
Yep.
It is, I won't go into the whole story, but it is Christmas Eve in high above London. The alien Sorcrax are holding the Earth for ransom.
The
Sycorax. And the 10th Doctor must recover from his regeneration in time to save the human race from slavery. We get this is our first modern regeneration.
Right.
We get a new Doctor from the area that we've not seen before because we'd gone from Eccleston. And this is very similar to Davison's, it's just not going well. And, and I do think it's kind of funny that, Rose and Mickey and everything put him in bed, throw a cover over him, and then they leave. Let's go Christmas shopping. Versus shouldn't you be watching him? But
well, they do leave him with Jackie, don't they?
I think so. So anyway, this is it is a wonderful recap to see how the modern era dealt with regenerations, to kind of go back to the Doctor having to get correct before he handles. And since then, there's always been a little bit of transition time, both when Matt Smith took over and Peter Capaldi, and I would assume when Jodie, there'll be something similar to it. So that's my reverse of polarity.
Oh, that's
and I
excellent.
assume you would have picked that one too.
Yeah, actually, yeah. And another story I would have mentioned, obviously, would be the Big Bang, because of the Master's trap. But
yes,
so yeah, but I think the Christmas Invasion works far better.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so kudos to you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Now, interestingly enough, you talked about how you thought that the Doctor's struggling with his regeneration in Castrovalva ran on too long. I find that in the Christmas Invasion, personally, I find that his struggle is too short.
Ah, interesting.
So I think it's just coming from like my classic Who standpoint, my viewpoint. So yeah, I think it's like that. An hour just kind of rushes. Like, well, it's not really much of a struggle because it's over so quickly.
That's a great point, Charles, because coming from the two different perspectives,
right.
Because I've watched the 10th Doctor and I've watched the 11th Doctor, but because by the time the 11th hour over, we have him in his new bow tie and he's, totally set in. And then Capaldi, when he's in London,
right,
with the dinosaur, is set pretty much by the end of the episode. So I think that's the difference between the modern and classic storytelling.
Right.
And I think that's a really good point. From your perspective, you're going, no, it happened a little too soon.
Yeah, I could kind of flip that back on you a little bit, I guess, because just from my viewpoint, it's like, well, that's not really much of a struggle compared to what Davison's Doctor went through.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really valid feedback. And I think if you brought up a really good point, and I think Ken did one of them, that he thinks, right, one of you said that your doctor is the doctor you watch the most of
right away
when you first get in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And
because I started 2 episodes with Tom Baker's Doctor, but I didn't latch on to Tom Baker's Doctor because I got to see the complete Davison era.
Right. And so I do think that's because of you going through the different regenerations, and we're going to continue our post, during this dark time between the Christmas special, we're going to go through some other regeneration episodes. So it'll be interesting. I will watch those with that eye of comparing it to the modern era. And did the modern era rush it too much?
Right. Good.
So
that's hopefully it gives you a different perspective at least.
It did. I think that's a very well done.
All right.
Did we get any feedback this week?
We actually did. At first, I thought it was going to be just Holly because we left over her comments from last time.
Yeah.
But we also got some comments from Paul Beck from Australia.
Yay!
So we got 2 feedback this week on Castrovalva. First, let's do Holly. Holly writes in, "Hey guys, an introduction to a new doctor." And he realizes that he needs help because he can tell something is off with his regeneration. And he doesn't try to strangle any of his companions in the process. A sly dig on Colin Baker's 6th Doctor. I see what you did there, Holly.
Yes.
And I totally agree with you, by the way. We have the 0 room, and we hear the cloister bell. Poor Adric is being manipulated, used, and tortured by the Master. Of course, the Master would go back in time to the moment of the Big Bang. I could be wrong, but is this the first mention of jettisoning rooms? Yes, it is. As for like I said, I remember, or it pays off again later in The Doctor's Wife, as I talked about. Too bad K9 wasn't still around to help out. I totally agree. I'm sure Tegan and Nyssa would have appreciated him.
Yes, more K9 is always good. I have learned my lesson.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we want to hear.
Yes.
No peer pressure there. I think Nyssa and Tegan were the first ones to actually use the TARDIS online manual.
Yes.
Although, as the Doctor points out, that was just something that the Master had Adric fabricate.
Right.
Through block transfer computation. Let's see, but what else? Usually whatever incarnation of the Doctor would just ignore it or throw it out the main door, referring to the manual.
Yes, the Doctor is very much a quote-unquote guy,
Yeah.
stereotypical guy, like, manuals? We don't need manuals. Ask directions? Heck no.
No instructions needed. Yeah, I could do it. I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit of arrogance there. Tegan did her best with flying the TARDIS. Well, not so much, but I'm blaming the Master on that one, or a very touchy TARDIS. While it is great that and all that Nyssa and Tegan went searching for an entrance into Castrovalva, one of them should have at least stayed with the Zero Cabinet and the Doctor. I agree with that. And now we know part of the reason why the Fifth Doctor wears a piece of celery on his coat. I was chuckling at the scene where the Doctor was asking which way was the fastest way to leave, and he gets almost the scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz, and with the ladies pointing in all directions. Yeah, that was
nice
a great
reference, Holly.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. The ending with the twist that Castrovalva they were in was all of the Master's design, I kind of didn't see coming. Him dressing up as the Portreeve was typical him. I'll wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin. So thanks, Holly, for writing in.
Thank you, Holly. As always, we appreciate you going on this journey with us. Good feedback.
Great stuff. Paul from Australia writes in again. Hi, Charles and Jesse. What a great story for the introduction of the Fifth Doctor. In some ways, Matt Smith's first episode. The 11th hour is similar in that we are introduced to a half-baked Doctor, because yes, he's still cooking, struggling with his regeneration. Both at their point in history, they were the youngest actors to be cast as the Time Lord, coming off a run of the previous Doctor being very popular, i.e. Matt with David and Peter with Tom.
Absolutely.
That's a great point.
It is.
Very fair point, in my opinion. Both had big shoes to fill. Totally agree. And on the subject of shoes, did you notice that the shoes that Peter leaves as the breadcrumb trails in the TARDIS are different to the boots Tom wore in Legopolis? I did. Because, Tom Baker had boots on and Peter Davison left shoes behind. Because apparently when Tom left the show, he took those boots with him because, hey, he's Tom Baker and he can do whatever he wants.
Okay, very nice.
So this is a true story. I love the idea of separating Peter from Tom by completely unraveling Tom's wardrobe through the TARDIS, leading to this new Doctor finding his new outfit.
I agree.
As for the Master in these episodes, we get to see two of his plans fail to achieve what he was trying to do. There's a double fail on that one. And another of his brilliant disguises, just love it. I really feel sorry for him. Sometimes he tries so hard. So a little sympathy for the Master in that one. Ah,
okay. Very nice. Good job.
And sending you both my kindest regards always, Paul. So,
thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Great feedback. So great feedback from Holly and Paul that time.
Absolutely.
So if you want to be like Holly and Paul, obviously you can reach us as they did on our email, nextstopeverywheresmg, don't forget the SMG, @gmail.com. Or you can reach us on our Facebook page, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who Podcast. And we'd love to have you like that page and follow us there. Or on our Twitter page, @NextStopSMG, you can drop us a line there as well, and we'd be happy to share that. So 3 places where you can share that.
Absolutely. And we would love more feedback.
We love more feedback. And just like Holly and Paul, so you don't have to let them get the credit all the time, you can share some yourselves if you're so inclined. We'd definitely appreciate it. Now, next time on Next Stop Everywhere, before we get into our shameless plugs, we're going to talk about the Caves of Androzani. And this is a big story, one of my all-time favorite stories, maybe possibly my all-time favorite story.
Wow.
So spoilers there. This is Peter Davison's final story as the Fifth Doctor, and it's a humdinger, in my opinion, with, as far as I'm concerned, the best regeneration ever to this day.
Ooh, okay.
So
That's a bold claim there, Charles.
I'm throwing it down. It's
Good
also
deal.
the most heroic regeneration ever.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons I feel it's the best. because you have the doctor trying to save someone's life and dying in the process actively.
Nice. Okay.
So I'm looking forward to talking that with you. Now, it's going to be a few weeks, unfortunately, because yours truly is going off on vacation.
Yes.
So my wife and I are celebrating our 20th anniversary trip this time. And so we'll be back in a few weeks with the Caves of Androzani. So you've got plenty of time to watch it, no excuses. And definitely looking forward to talking about that with you in Next Stop Everywhere, episode 94.
And Charles doesn't know this, but when I edit this together, post-credits, there is going to be a little 5-minute bonus episode. I discussed I had a guy from Americana podcast on the show on my Bruce Springsteen show. And before we started talking music, he talked about how he was listening to Charles and I's episodes and how he and his wife are big Doctor Who fans and all their friends are Doctor Who fans. And so we spent about
great taste.
Yeah, so we spent about 5 minutes talking about he had some less than kind words, but respectful about Moffat. And so I have a little 5-minute snippet, and I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I throw this on Next Stop Everywhere? And he said, no. He says, that's fine. So post-credits, we'll have a little bitty 5-minute discussion on with that Doctor Who goes everywhere, which I think is amazing.
All right, sounds good. A little bonus scene.
Yes, exactly.
All right, sounds good. All right. So, Jesse, where can they get a hold of you on the interwebs?
So I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. I am Jesse Jackson on Facebook. You can hear me on Small Council Matters, the Game of Thrones podcast, on the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV podcast. We are enjoying the heck out of this season. I am also on Set Listing Bruce. We're continuing to go through talking to different Bruce Springsteen fans, and I may have an interview scheduled with a guy who has been involved with Bruce's professionally photography, where he and I are trying to work out some time.
Very cool.
So that's going to be fun. And
you got to be geeking hard about that.
Yes, I will. I am very geeking hard about it. This coming week, as we put this, I have a little bonus episode with some people's thoughts about Bruce being on Broadway. And then I have a Kevin Long from the Kevin Long Show on our network join me as a newbie. So that's coming up this week. Charles, what are you doing on your 2 other podcasts?
Well, obviously, with me going on vacation, it's going to be a little bit of a hiatus between those. But I just recorded new episodes of Ghostwood and the Phantom Zone podcast, Ghostwood the Twin Peaks podcast, which... I do Ghostwood the Twin Peaks podcast with Zan Sprouse and the Phantom Zone podcast with Karen Lindsay, who we were hoping would join us today, but unfortunately her schedule would not permit that. So hopefully at some point we'll get Karen back because she's always welcome. Open invitation to Karen on Next Stop Everywhere. I'm sure you agree, Jesse.
Absolutely, always.
And as for me, you can reach me at Charles Skaggs on the Twitter machine, at Charles Skaggs on the Instagram, Google Plus for all you crazy kids on the Google Plus, Facebook, of course, at Charles Skaggs. Would love to get your friend request there. And, of course, my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot. Where I talk about Next Stop Everywhere, Doctor Who, and all kinds of comics and sci-fi goodness, Twin Peaks, The Flash, you name it, I talk about it. And also give updates on our podcast when new episodes are released. So it's a great way to, if you're curious about other podcasts, you can check those out there as well. And would definitely appreciate that. Thanks to everybody who's been checking out the blog. And I'm only about 5,000 views away from hitting 1 million page views of all time.
Wow, that is awesome.
So almost 1 million page views served on Damn Good Coffee.
How long have you been doing your blog?
7 years.
Okay, very nice.
So it took me a while to get there. but I'm just the little blog that could. But here
That's great.
it's
That's awesome.
almost 1 million page views. So cheers
Good
to
for
everybody
you.
who enjoys my blog, and I appreciate you guys checking it out. Those of you who do. So yeah, we're going to be back for the Caves of Androzani in a few weeks, and please
Yes.
be patient. And I'm sure Jesse, you have a sign-off quote.
I do. You and the lovely Lori travel safe and have fun.
Thank you.
We will miss you. And then I'm hoping to Labor Day weekend. I'm at Dragon Con, so I'm hoping to get some interview a couple of Doctor Who fans and kind of do a live from Dragon Con episode that will have. I did not make any Doctor Who panels.
Okay.
But I'm gonna stick around, kind of, hey, hi. We'll go from there, and I'm hoping that I can get Matt Smith is going to be there. I'm hoping to get his autograph. So
that would be awesome.
That would be very awesome.
Very
yes.
cool. Very cool. I've got Matt Smith's autograph because thankfully my sister-in-law got that for me.
Oh, nice.
But I would love to meet him in person because I haven't had that chance yet. So that would be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to. And then I don't, I'm debating on, do I pay the money to get a picture because he's a doctor, so of course you would. But
yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted.
Good luck.
Charles, there's a lot of dark things happening right now.
Yes.
But
and not just because there's going to be an eclipse tomorrow.
Right.
But so those of you, hopefully everybody enjoys that eclipse. But yeah, the world is getting to be a very dark place, and thankfully we have Doctor Who to kind of light the way.
Absolutely. And I pulled a quote from the Almost People.
Yes.
And I am
Matt Smith
and always
era episode.
Yes, I am and always will be the optimist, the hope of far-flung hopes and dreamer of impossible dreams. And that's what I'm asking everyone to keep that mindset as well, because we will get through this.
Yes.
Thank you, Charles.
Stay
as always,
strong, everybody, and
yes.
keep hope alive, as Jesse might say.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time, right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I wanted to let you know I've been listening to your Doctor Who podcast as well. So,
nice.
My wife and I are both fans. All our friends are geeks in the area, so we're big Doctor Who fans.
Oh, good. We'll have to talk about that. What is your thoughts on Capaldi?
Of the new series, he's probably my favorite Doctor in terms of appearance and mannerisms and general character. But I think the episode writing for Capaldi has been very poor.
Okay. I think that's a fair assessment. I came in the modern era. As if you listen to the podcast, you can certainly tell. And I've learned to embrace the classic episodes and find a lot of greatness in them. So Tennant's kind of my Doctor.
Fair enough.
But I have loved what Capaldi has done with it. I've loved the depth that he's brought. I thought, like the Husbands of River Song and that wonderful bittersweet ending, I don't know if Matt Smith or David Tennant could have carried that off as well. That the age and the wisdom in his, kind of the showing the true kind of weariness of a Time Lord is just been great. So I totally agree. And I loved Russell T Davies. I love Stephen Moffat. Doctor Who is Doctor Who, and even when it's bad, it's good. But I do think it's time for a fresh blood, because it's a difficult show to write.
Well, we can argue about this some other day. I think I think Moffat has pretty nearly ruined Doctor Who, and I think he's pretty nearly ruined Sherlock as well. But we can argue about that another day.
No, that's interesting. What makes you think that? And I promise we'll get to music in a minute. This is just fascinating.
I think Moffat is in love with his own cleverness as a plotter, so he can't resist the big reveal that turns the whole universe upside down. And, that's not what we want from a series like Sherlock or Doctor Who. Maybe once a decade you can do that, but he's just in love with, ever folding universe, folding in on universe, folding in on universe. And he kind of forgets that he's supposed to be entertaining an audience and telling a Doctor Who story or telling a Sherlock Holmes story.
I get the Doctor Who especially, and I don't know if you listened to the episode we talked about before the finale where I said it was a collection of what I think is his worst traits,
Yeah.
just the middle time and okay, we get it, time's moving different and I truly hate sometimes they do two-parters that I don't think need two-parters, and sometimes it's clever. I do get mad at his kind of sticking his tongue out at the audience.
Yeah.
And like Missy saying his name is Doctor Who, and just
right.
And it just like after a while, I just want the Doctor and a companion to go have an adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is some beauty to that.
Yes.
And so, and then sometimes don't try to be overly clever. I just listened to a broadcast with the showrunners of Better Call Saul.
Okay.
And Vince and I don't remember the other guy's name, but they said that some director said that there's a beauty to showing the audience 2 + 2, but don't tell them the answer's 4, and they figure it out themselves. And
okay.
and I think sometimes Moffat wants to go 2 + 2 is 27, and
right.
and it's like no, I just 2 + 2 is 4, and that's good. It is nice to see. So cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, very nice. Well, cool. I may have you. We should have you join Charles and I sometime, and we can talk. That's nice. That'd be fun. I am at least proud. I am glad to hear, because I guess the theory is they're going to go younger for a Doctor and more traditional, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do. I'm going to watch no matter who's the actor, and so I'm going to trust, it's the Neil Gaiman story, right? That he says the method is, oh my God, this guy, no way he can be the Doctor. And then it's like, well, okay, maybe. And then you move to, oh my God, how was I so blind? This guy's perfect as the Doctor. He says is the kind of theory of accepting a new Doctor, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right. That was fun. Thanks.